I was watching Morning Joe this morning, and yes, you could mock me, but I say know your enemy. Keep your enemy close. That's why I watch corporate media. I want to know if you don't keep in mind the alternative reality that comes, you need to have a little righteous anger in you. So sometimes I watch Morning Joe. Claire McCaskill is up for re-election, so Morning Joe has her on because Mika and Claire are like BFF, and they got to have their BFF on. So they have her on, and she does the typical bashing Trump, which is fine. I don't like Trump, but then she goes after the pharmaceutical companies. So I said, oh, this is interesting. She's going after the pharmaceutical companies. All you got to do is Google it, and well, the money don't lie. The same industries they're bashing, they are taking money from in the other hand. So she was bashing Big Pharma. So I went to opensecrets.org. So top contributors to Claire McCaskill from 2005 when she started to 2018. Express Scripts has given her $161,688. Her seventh largest donor. See, they can't attack Bernie Sanders really on policy because his policies are all wildly popular. Medicare for all at record levels of support. You got free public college, very, very popular. Break up the banks, popular. End the wars, popular. So they can't really attack Bernie. I'm talking about the media, the establishment. They can't attack Bernie on policy because then they would sound ridiculous. So what are they going to do now? And I think you're going to see a lot more of this. You got places like Politico who are now attacking Bernie Sanders for not condemning Russia enough. So apparently Bernie was supposed to, with a bare bones staff compared to Hillary Clinton, going up against the entire Democratic establishment, federal, state, and local, going up against CNN, going up against MSNBC, going up against the New York Times, going up against the Washington Post, who wrote 16 awful stories about him in 24 hours. He was also supposed to be condemning Russia and their lies about Hillary Clinton. What's incredible about this, as somebody who covered, I think I covered probably 40 to 50 Bernie Sanders rallies, events. I never interviewed Bernie. I'd love to one day, Senator Sanders. I interviewed a lot of his campaign advisors. I interviewed a lot of his supporters. They're trying to make it seem, they're trying to like muddy the waters here. On one end, they're trying to make it seem like Bernie Sanders' revolution, the rallies that had 30,000 people, 40,000 in some cases, something was inflated about it. The Russians had an impact. So they're trying to degrade his revolution, and they're also at the same time trying to tie him to the Kremlin, because as we've seen, and I just posted a video about this before I went live, there is now like a social media McCarthyism going on. Puerto Rico, not only is electricity not back altogether, the governor of Puerto Rico, he's trying to basically privatize the whole electrical system because, as we know, Naomi Klein did amazing work on this. I think her book was Disaster Capitalism. Basically, these natural disasters, which aren't even natural because it's climate change causing most of them, it's vulture capitalism on steroids. The public officials that are helping the problem, it's just a ploy to privatize the whole damn island. Rossello used his State of the State speech to say that he has introduced an energy reform bill on Monday while outlining ideas for cutting taxes, increasing police pay, and introducing education reforms. So the solution to a epic natural disaster, 2 hurricanes, and I think it was 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks, is to privatize the electrical system, increase police pay, cut taxes, and education reforms. That's going to fix the problem. Because we've seen that works in other places, right? So it's like, okay, so basically, I'm sorry to be brash, but it's like, okay, if all water went away, we need something to drink. What do you do? What do you do? Do you drink your urine? I'm not trying to be gross. I'm just saying. What are these people supposed to do? The danger is compounded by Puerto Rico's system of pipes, pumping stations, and treatment plants, which has registered more drinking water violations than any other state or territory in the United States of America. Let me write that one more time. This danger is compounded by Puerto Rico's systems of pipes, pumping stations, and treatment plants, which has registered more drinking water violations than any other state or territory in the United States. The best countries that are doing the best economically are the ones that have the most educated populace. Yet we have teachers all over the country that in many cases cannot even afford to pay for their school supplies that are not being supplied to them by their government. They can't supply, they have to pay out of pocket to help parents and for other things like after school programs and things like that. So West Virginia, they had to go on strike for Colton. They had to go on strike for, I think it was 8 days, just to get a 5% raise. And you know what? They were absolutely demonized by the right wing, and frankly, subtly, by the media. Well, this is a long time. I saw it on CNN. No, this is a long time for the kids to be out of class. What about the kids? Are these teachers, how long are they going to go on? You know what? I think, and I tweeted about this earlier, I think that the students who didn't have an education for 8 or 9 days, I think that the students that didn't go to class for 8 or 9 days probably learned more in those 8 or 9 days from the examples of their teachers than they would have learned in class in those 8 or 9 days, if I'm telling you the truth. When you ask the people in the Rust Belt about Russia, they don't really care. And it was almost like telling Robert Costa and the people on the set of Morning Joe that your cat is missing. You should have seen their face. What do you mean they don't care? They don't care in like Gary, Indiana about Russia? They don't care in like Dayton, Ohio about Russia? Like the cognitive dissonance on why this con man, orangutan, who is a con man, misled these people in the Rust Belt, was able to win those regions is still so vigilant. They don't understand. These corporate outlets and certain independent outlets, to be honest with you, don't understand why huge swaths of America, it's not just the Rust Belt, there's a lot of other regions, don't care about Russia. When you ask them what's on their mind or what's their top issues, it's healthcare, the economy, violence, for some regions, immigration. They don't care about Russia. But when you watch Morning Joe or CNN or read the New York Times or even frankly like Fox.com, BuzzFeed, all these places, it's an alternative reality. They don't get it because they're not out there with those people, which is why I'm launching this company. Because you got to be out there with the people. Let me tell you something. If I'm admitting it, before I was at TYT, before I was out in the country, I was a lot more of a capital D Democrat than I was like an independent progressive. Because I didn't know as much as I do now. I didn't see as much as I do. The move to alter some key aspects of the Dodd Frank law comes 10 years after the financial crisis rocked the nation's economy. The bill has overwhelming Republican support. I mean, go figure. And enough Democrat backing that it's expected to gain the 60 votes necessary to clear the Senate. That was reflected in the 67-32 vote Tuesday with 16 Democrats. And what is the point of having an opposition party if that opposition party is carrying the corrupt Republicans over the line to do the same fucking thing? Am I in the twilight zone? 16 Democrats, and go figure, most of them are up for re-election. Because they're not public servants, they're bought-off plutocrats. Several Democratic lawmakers facing tough re-election races this year have broken ranks with Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who, by the way, they used to call him Wall Street Chuck, because Chuck Schumer, excuse my French, has bent over for Wall Street over his 20-year career, and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Senator John Tester of Montana, up for re-election this year. When I was at the Young Turks, I did a video. He actually had a fundraiser where one of the co-hosts for this fundraiser was a Republican who had the largest FEC violation in American history. Because it's unbelievable to me. In this country, there is more media attention on Trump, who at this point there is no evidence that he criminally colluded with the Russian government to hack emails. I said that in the beginning. There's no hard evidence. But there is evidence that Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan lied in front of Congress and perjured himself on the first time he knew about the Legionnaires' outbreak in Flint. He lied. There is evidence that he knew well before he said he knew about the complaints in Flint. There is no investigation into Governor Rick Snyder. And we are supposed to just believe that all his officials at the state environmental agency that report to the governor, it's a state agency, that he just didn't know what they were doing or not doing. He didn't know. So in this country, and by the way, there are people from Flint watching, how do you still feel about paying for his criminal defense fund, which at this point, between Snyder and his state officials that the taxpayers are paying for their lawyers, is now over $12 million of taxpayer money to pay their legal fees? How do you feel about that, Flint? And I want to make something clear. I don't think it's there's no doubt Russia, their trolls, bots, probably through the government, did push through an excessive amount of propaganda, fake news on social media platforms. I'm not denying that. People that deny that at this point, you're wrong. I mean, there were Russian bots, there were Russian trolls. We just have to state the facts. But this hysteria on CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, you have Rachel Maddow literally almost breaking down on MSNBC about Robert Mueller, who, by the way, Robert Mueller is not a good guy. He helped George W. Bush launch us into the Iraq War. He was the FBI director after 9/11 that rounded about 1,000 Muslims and took them in for questioning without no reason to. He also helped George W. Bush cover up the fact that George W. Bush fucked up and didn't read serious intelligence before 9/11 memos, bin Laden primed to strike using airplane. All these people are freaking out about, our democracy is at risk, our democracy. I didn't hear that when 200,000 people were purged off the rolls during the New York primary. But I want to get to, and I don't want to get like, I can't have intellectually dishonest conversations anymore with people. These people who say, well, what about the knives? What about this? First of all, that's a bullshit argument. People were sending me an example of a mass stabbing in China that knife attack killed 30-something people. Yeah, it was 8 people on a train track. 8 people armed with knives. Can you imagine if 8 people came with AR-15s and handguns to Marjorie Parkland School? God forbid how many people would have died. So let's not do anything because theoretically other things can kill you. So they're basically telling them run on tax breaks to reduce the cost of healthcare, kind of a conservative talking point, and allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Well, why didn't I think of allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices? The only problem with that? The donors won't allow you. Big Pharma won't allow you. When Obama was president, that was proposed. The mega donors that run the country, the plutocrats that run the country, will not allow you to let Medicare negotiate cheaper drug prices, which is what Canada does, what other countries, civilized countries that actually care about their people and not their donors do. Why didn't I think about that? The D.C.C. So they don't worry about actual public opinion, because public opinion polling shows Medicare for all is at record popularity. Again, almost half, I think it was the last poll I looked at, 47% of Republicans were for Medicare for all. When I went on the campaign trail, I probably covered near an equal amount of Bernie rallies and Trump rallies. Trump supporters, in their wisdom and infamy, they liked free health care. The morning after the October 1st mass shooting in Las Vegas, a member of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee press staff warned House candidates and their staffs not to, quote, politicize the shooting that day. Politicization, according to the D.C.C.C official, including talking about gun violence prevention policy. Quote, you and your candidate will be understandably outraged and upset, as will your community. However, all capitals they put, do not politicize it today. Essentially, the D.C.C, in both Medicare for All, as well as their instruction on gun policy, is essentially banking on the fact that the country is still moderate or center-right. That's really what the D.C.C, their strategy is. They think going into each community, the country is center-right. Whereas when you poll issue by issue, the country is not center-right, the country is center-left. The entire fabric of the Lakota and Dakota way of life on the Standing Rock Reservation was disrupted by the Army Corps of Engineers. And I can tell you, because I did interviews in Standing Rock, I can't get this out of my mind. It's like seared in my brain. I did an interview with a man, an older gentleman, B.J. Kidder, I think his last name was. And he was talking to, he must be probably in his 50s and his 60s, and he was relaying a story about how his family, their home was taken, I think in the 1960s or 70s, and the Army Corps promised them a new house with free electricity and all that. Well, that new house and free electricity never came for them. And what did they have to do? What were they forced to do because the United States stole their land to put in this dam? They had to sleep out in tents in the frozen tundra in the winter. Young kids with their parents sleeping out. If you were at Standing Rock, you know how cold it was. I'm talking in December, January, February, March. That is bitterly cold. In some cases, could be deadly to sleep outside. I couldn't believe it when I was interviewing him. The inhumanity that is just commonplace towards Native Americans.